individual's microphone if necessary, as well as the moderator can and will remove individuals from the meeting if necessary. With that said, Mr. Kerr, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. And a couple of you maybe just got on. We were just talking about the one positive benefit of the virtual meeting is we don't have to go out in the cold tonight. So, and then we have a few things on the agenda. We had missed some building grounds meetings this year, so I'd ask, if we could have one tonight since we're having an executive session and a board meeting. So it made sense to, there's some things that have been hanging out there. Want to keep things moving, just got to maintain the school. So, and then the first thing on the agenda is the Eisenhower Elementary and Architect proposal discussion and committee discussion to provide direction to the architects for possible work at Eisenhower Elementary. So we had a field meeting at the Eisenhower Elementary School about, I'm going to say a month ago, plus or minus a week or so. And, to open the discussions with Buchard Horn, our architect of record now. And so what we wanted to do tonight was further define the scope of what we want the architect to do. And the short 3 years that I've been on the board, I've been trying to improve our processes, working with our architects so that we're not spending time and money on them and time and for us. So we wanted to really define this thing. We learned a lot from the East Pike office project. So the administration, thank you for putting together what you guys put together. And then I'd put together a spreadsheet too that I can share if we need to, or at least I can go over it here later. I see Eli just joined. Thank you, Eli. So we're just getting started. So, Mike, do you want to go over your PowerPoint first, or how do you?
Yes, sir. If that's okay with you, sir. Would you mind, Mr. Kerr?
No.
Randy, I'm going to pull up a screen real quick. Give me 1 second, sir. One second.
While Mike's doing that, what the administrative team has done is put together some ideas for this scope. It's open discussion tonight. If we want to add, subtract, further revise, and we'd asked Eli from Buchard Horn to join us because to me it's really important for the engineer or architect to be involved in this scoping so that he understands why, when, and where, and what the intent is of what we're thinking we want them to do. So go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kerr. Sorry for the technical issues I was having there. As you stated, sir, myself, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Kroner, and Ms. Eisman got together and just started to walk through and discuss what we could do at Ike to upgrade the facilities there. And I want to be pretty clear and upfront when I say I think our first priority is based upon the line of safety for students and staff. And the focus that we had was the entryway, followed by the removal of the modules. And then thirdly, what else could we do there for future planning? Again, these are just ideas and discussions. To say anything set in stone is premature, inaccurate, and quite simply false. These decisions up for the board, but we want to at least present our ideas for discussion, to be open, to be honest, to be transparent about where we stand. And again, they're just ideas. And Mr. Kerr, to be upfront and be very direct with you and the committee, it's not about closing buildings, opening buildings. It's about safety first of the entryway, followed by the modules, and then what other long-term planning needs you may want or what the committee may want to think about. For example, one thing we fall short on a lot of times is gym space, giving adequate gym space and gym time to extracurricular activities in the evenings. That's one thing that's always an issue. So we just want to have discussion, and whatever direction the board goes, we'll absolutely fall in line with that. We are just appreciative of the fact that we could come forward and give some ideas and thoughts based on the tour that we conducted at Ike, if that's okay, sir. First thing, order of priorities. We got together and we said, look, how should this go and how should this look? We thought the office space, the entry, that should say office space / entryway, should be the new priority, the big priority. Number one, issue number one, phase number one. How do we really accommodate the safety aspect of that, as well as maintaining an area that allows the nurse, the guidance office, and the principal to be all in one location if possible, because that's what we discussed about minimizing traffic all through the building. And then phase 1 or 2, whatever the board may decide, or it could be no phase, but whatever the board may decide, was we thought about, okay, if we were to get the office space, what other moves can we make internally without increasing the size of building, both the number of kids and or number of classrooms that need to be built? What could we do to end and remove the modules and renovate certain areas to accommodate the building as is? And then we thought for item number 3, which is phase 3, which could be years down the road, is, okay, what else can we do to increase the value and resources of that building? As we know, we have a couple things in mind. One, we know that we have need adequate space for extracurricular programming. We know we have classrooms and libraries and music rooms being taken up in classrooms. So if we were to make that different, what would that look like? Again, let me reiterate, Mr. Kerr, the goal for administration's perspective and view tonight is to talk about phase 1 projects, not even get to phase 3. However, we think it should be something that the board at least considers and discusses, and we'll leave that up to you. But again, our priorities is talking about the renovation of the building itself with regards to the front entryway / principal area, as well as the possible removal of the modules, because that's what this committee asked us. This committee said pretty clearly, Mike, if we were to remove the modules, how would you fit the kids elsewhere in the building? And hopefully we can do that this evening. And Ms. Eisenman, Mr. Kronauer, Mr. Heinrich, anyone else on the call, if you want to chime in, anything I misspoke or misspeak on, please do so to provide additional clarity. One thing we thought was the priority number 1 was office space. Now, again, the purpose of tonight, Mr. Kerr, the way I understand it, is decide what direction or what our vision is for Ike and have an open and honest conversation. Not that our ideas or our recommendations are set in stone, but they are examples, and there's something to start the conversation with, and we can easily renovate and redo these ideas. We just wanted to start the conversation. And again, Mr. Kerr, these are just ideas. They're not set in stone, but we thought we want to come forward with that, and whatever the board wants to do, we could do. Because again, remember, we're educators, we're not architects, and we don't have the experience that you and others may have in this field, but we at least want to share some ideas. One, while we are recommending that, we are cautious about using the spare classroom. We're concerned about losing that space. However, if the board decides to take that space, we just have to understand we may need that down the road. We respectfully request looking at the idea. We'll see what the cost may be associated with adding a space in the 2 squares that are included on this chart on the left or right. But we're concerned because we understand the value of the large windows and don't want to lose them. And we don't know, put them where the modular is exactly a great idea. But again, we are just trying to show some ideas for discussion that really takes a follow-up to our tour. In office space, we should have space for the following. We think we're asking respectfully that the receptionist, principal, nurse, guidance, and a copy room be located in there, and as well as a bathroom if we could do that. But again, that's something way down the road that we're just trying to give a vision of what we thought could be beneficial. Additionally, if you put a new office way out back here where the old modulars are, or if you don't, you could use that for added parking in that area. One issue or one concern that has been brought up a couple times was the lack of parking, and we could maybe possibly use that area for parking. Step 1, in my opinion, sir, would be to get the survey that we talked about of that area, so we know exactly what is our property and what is not, as that's part of the research development process and where we're at. If you asked us what goes in these different offices, Mr. Kerr, what we are respectfully requesting the board to consider and the architects to take consideration is in the main office, we want a secure entryway, right, with the mousetrap. We want a space for the admin assistant with video monitors for security purposes. We would prefer a conference room for meetings with families and visitors, if that's possible, rather than taking them through an outside building. Okay, hold on, baby.
We made you a castle.
Okay, that's great. We also asked the principal's office be in there, a single bathroom if possible, small storage, staff mailboxes, and a copier and laminer if those things are possible. Again, you were asking for what we think is ideal. I don't know if it fits. That would be the part of Eli and his team, or Elijah and his team, to come up with. These are just the things that we thought would be beneficial to be in that area. As far as the nurse's office and guidance, when we look at the nurse and guidance, we thought it should be similar to in East Pike in size and room numbers. Now it's a smaller school, but we'll still have parents coming into that building wanting to meet with the counselor and/or principal. So we thought that conference room in one central location would be ideal. If not, we're at least looking in the nurse's office, have a nurse's station with sink for medications, restrooms, shower, bathroom, closet for storage, cots and beds for the students to lie down, and a washer or dryer. The guidance office, when Miss Eisenman met with the guidance counselor, she's pretty upfront. Look, I just need a room that can fit a desk and a table of 4 chairs so I can have small group sessions or meeting with parents. So we thought that was pretty straightforward from our purview. Moving on, if you want to remove the additional modular classrooms, what we thought could be best, and again, this is up for debate, and especially I'll defer to the committee as well as Elijah. We thought if we took the classrooms that were in the existing modular and put them in the wings identified, we'd take one music room and make that a STEM/computer lab, and then there's several smaller rooms on this right-hand side of this hallway, a copy room, a learning lab, some other things we thought we can commandeer and repurpose and rebuild to meet our learning needs of the small learning groups that are going to have to take place. So we thought that was possible. And that's under the understanding or the hope that we can move the counselor nurse into the central location to free up some of that excess room. Again, these are just ideas, but we wanted to come forward with a discussion point for tonight. Under priority 3, we're going to argue and take the position that we're nowhere near ready for that. But as we always talk about facilities planning and looking at our resources and accessibility to those things, one thing we thought we could do, no matter what rooms you take in this wing to repurpose and/or where you put the entryway, a multi-purpose room using with a gym could be in there. Because one thing, not only you run an issue after school activities, but let's not forget in Ike right now the gym and the cafeteria is one in the same place, and it'd be nice to have another gym if possible. Again, that's years down the road. Not saying we have to do it, but when you ask us to think down the future, I think we'd be remiss not to bring it up. Now, do I have to get ahead of ourselves and say we're going down that road? Absolutely not. But I think it's something worth bringing up. In the room specifications, they're pretty straightforward. We're also going to need a space for the school psychologist and speech pathologist to work. And then if you ask Mike, why are you even asking for the extra room? Well, 2 reasons stand out. One, we're projecting that the autistic program will continue to grow. Thus, we'll need the space and need a classroom relatively soon. And then secondly, we need a space for PT and OT, and they use that room now for those type of services and other outside services that may come in the building. Again, I know if the board decides to go a different direction, I have no doubt Elijah and his team can work with us to make sure we take that in consideration. But we at least wanted to bring that up front, because when we did the tour, I was unaware of some of those different programs, and when we met, it came to light, and I just want to make sure that the committee was aware of it. If you ask us, Mike, what's your thoughts? What's your recommendation? We do this in a phase. We do this in steps. We go slow to go fast. There's no need to rush and get anxiety and people get upset and people get nervous. But I do think we have a responsibility to address the entryway. And I think part of addressing that entryway is addressing the offices that we spoke of, as well as you have the opportunity now, if you want to consider removing the modular classrooms. Again, that's up for the board. That's up for the committee to decide. We'll follow whatever direction the board wants to go, and we'll support that. But that would be our recommendation, to do this in steps. Down the road, if you want to make it a bigger school, if you want a multi-purpose room for extracurricular activities, or to be able to give us some room in the cafeteria and free up some of that area for other programming, then we could do that as well. But we're not there yet. But we thought we'd be remiss if we at least didn't bring that to the forefront. Now, again, we're still going to recommend going in small steps and make sure that this is something that's practical and doable for the board. And that's something that is, reflective of your vision. We're hopeful that tonight is a conversation about really giving Elijah and his team some additional guidance and ideas about what you're thinking. That way they have the ability to work. And we'll defer to you, Mr. Kerr. But I hope that addresses your questions. And before I turn it back over to committee, I would like to turn over to Mr. Kronauer, Mr. Heinrich, and or Ms. Eisenman, and see if there's anything else they want to add that I may have skipped. If not, I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
The only thing I think, Mr. Vukovic, that I'd like to add is just, in all of our conversations we've been having between Ms. Eisman, Mr. Heinrich, even the staff in the building, I think we've come to the conclusion in any scenario we cannot completely lose the modulars or replace the modulars somewhere else within the building without gaining space somewhere. With all the services we are providing to students now and looking to expand those services, We just cannot absorb those 4 spaces into the building without adding it somewhere or adding on to the building. But I think, Mr. Vukovic, you did a great job of addressing pretty much everything we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks.
Jared, one question on that. Is that if we don't lose that classroom, is your statement still the same? Or is that only if we lose that classroom for the office?
I think, Mr. Kerr, if we lose that, if we would lose that corner classroom there, that first classroom when you come in the front door there, we would just need to add, whether it doesn't necessarily need to be office space. It could be a classroom space somewhere, you know, an actual permanent classroom down where the modulars are. But we need space somewhere. You know, in a typical year, and this is just an example, you know, Eisenhower typically has 5 5th grade rooms and 5 4th grade rooms. That's typical. We need to be able to work in a year even when there are possibly 6 of one grade. And you know, right now as a district, we're a little fearful of what next year may bring. What with COVID gone, you know, we have a very small kindergarten classroom this year, so we're kind of the thought that we may have a bubble class coming through, and we need to be able to absorb that one day as they get to Eisenhower. You know, if that's a Ben Franklin kindergarten is big next year, and as it comes up through, we need to have a classroom space for them at Eisenhower. And that's just an example. It could be any year for any reason. We don't want to be so tight in that school that we can't absorb a year when there may be 6 of one of those grades. So we're certainly, if we get rid of that classroom, we just need something else somewhere, some small addition to make up for that loss.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mike. I feel less nervous after our field meeting, because I knew when we came out of that meeting that there was a lot of good conversation that we had there, but there was really nothing defined or anything like that. I know one thing we wanted to learn from with the East Pike office project, we didn't like the HVAC system that the architect had come up with. By the time it was known to us, it was, you know, basically too late to change and too expensive to change. So that's what I've been trying not to get ourselves into again. So, you know, I don't know, at some point, you know, and is Eli, is it okay if do you want to be called Elijah or Eli?
Eli's fine.
Okay. At some point, you know, have a conversation with Greg Trout about, you know, the HVAC system. So what happened at East Pike doesn't happen again. But, and before I turn it over to the rest of the committee, I'd like to just say, Mike, I agree with you. You know, we had met a few years ago and brainstormed what the highest priorities in the district were. And this East Pike and the Eisenhower entryways were both, you know, at the top of the list. So we're finally getting to Eisenhower. A couple comments I'll make before I open it up to the location of the modulars and office. I mean, I understand the concept there of why that might be, you know, a spot to pick, but I look at the office as the heart of the building, and to me, that's sort of the hand or a foot of the building. So, you know, it's not out of the question, but, you know, Eli and your group, you know, keep that in mind. And then we had talked a little bit at the field meeting about possibly taking some of the curved glass, if needed, to construct a new office. And that would do a lot, you know, several things. It would provide a spot to put an office, leave that classroom, but it would also, I think, provide benefit to heating and cooling that big open area. Next thing, it would also, those windows are all going to need, I think, replaced as part of this office construction. And to replace all those windows, any windows are expensive. So it'd be a way to maybe minimize that, because, you know, we have to make that entrance secure in addition to, I think, being more energy efficient. So, you know, there is an opportunity to take some of that area to put an office. you talked about, we wanted a mousetrap, the conference room, all the different things. The only other thing was, at East Pike, we had a sliding window and that you could pass things back and forth. That's, maybe getting into a little bit of detail, but you have to have room for that. So you want to consider it, now in this scoping stage. And then, like you said, the HVAC stuff that talked over with Mike and Greg. And with that, I saw Tom, you raised your hand. So.
Thanks, Terry. Right now, in 2019, there were 228 kids in that building. And as Jared said, they need 5 classrooms for 4th grade and 5 for 5th grade, which is 10 classrooms total. In the wing to the right, along, I guess that's School Street, there are 11 classrooms and a life skills rooms, which is 12. There's 4 modular classrooms. And the building also has 3 music rooms for a total of somewhere huge. When you plot this classroom and look at a 20% growth, we only need at that, with that calculation, 12 classrooms total, if we have 20% growth of this building. Now, obviously 2020 is a little bit different. We're down about 25 people or so there. So using the 2019 as a more typical year, we only need 10 classrooms. And I disagree that we need to if we take the one classroom labeled conference room number 11, that we have to add a classroom. The building has a lot of space in it. Some of the spaces that are being vacated for the new offices can be reallocated. The life skills room could be either changed or left. So I'm going to argue with the first assumption that if we take a classroom, we have to add a classroom. According to the numbers, we have more than enough classrooms. If we need specialized rooms for PT or OT or something like that, then we can either put them into some of the rooms that are being vacated, or we need to build specialized rooms and not necessarily classrooms. We already looked at putting an office in front of the glass, and we could certainly pull that plan out and send it to Elijah, and that would streamline his process. Taking the only way to put anything on the right hand side is to take classroom 11 and build out to the sidewalk, which allows some other things to happen there. But the first thing I want to dispute is that we need more rooms in this building. This building had 300 and some kids in it at one time, and now it only has 228. So my stance is that we could afford to demolish the in a normal year, not in a year where we're dealing with 15 kids in a classroom. In a normal year, we do not need the modulars, and we have more than enough rooms to put 250 kids in. Thank you.
Okay. And you can share some of your calculations with Mike and Walter and the rest of the board. And then
I believe, Terry, I sent this out to the board a week or two ago.
Yeah. So I'll ask Mike and Jared to share that with Eli, and then they can verify things. And then the only thing I would add on to what you said is it possible, instead of coming toward the street with that classroom addition for an office, could you go east and elongate it? And so that's something else, Eli, you can look at. So Barb, do you have any comments?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you can't, for some reason the camera's not working. I have a yellow screen and I can't see Mike. Mike's yellow and Cinda's yellow. A bunch of people are all yellow. So having this meeting tonight was about the scope of Eisenhower towards the architects, correct, Terry?
That
We're
was
trying
one
to
of the reasons.
decide the scope.
Well, we started the discussion at the field meeting that we had at the school.
So at that meeting, we are having deliberations on making Eisenhower a 500 student school, housing all of the 4th and 5th graders. How is that part of the scope that we're having the architects look at, or is it just the office, how to rearrange the office space?
Well, like Mike had in his PowerPoint, phase 1 in phase 1 or 2 is looking at the office and entryway, and then looking at demolishing the modulars and how that would fit into, the rest of the school. And then, Tom got into the debate of whether we would need room or not need room to do that. And then the idea that was discussed at the field also was the addition of a multi-purpose room, which has been looked at before and analyzed. And I know from discussions a couple years ago, there was, time and safety concerns with using the gym and the cafeteria in Eisenhower. So I think it's a good time to look at that also.
So my question though is, because Elijah is here, what are we asking the architect specifically to design for? Because I believe, do we have a vote tonight at tonight's board meeting on the scope of their work? And I was just curious if that's part of their scope or if it's just looking at the office.
It's looking at the office. It's looking at demoing the modulars. It's looking at the possibility of where a multi-purpose room would go. And that's what the motion was the last time. But I was one of the ones that agreed that we didn't have a defined enough scope for the architect. Like I said, I do this for a living, and if you don't have a defined scope, you're going to muddle back and forth and waste time and money. And that's what I'm trying not to do. Further define this so that we're comfortable with what we're asking the architects. And I'll clarify too, Barb, we're not asking them to actually do final design of anything at this point. This is just, we're defining the scope. We're going to then, Buchard Horn is then going to provide us some options back based on what our scope is. So we're not, again, we're not voting to do final design and construct anything at this point. That would be a future vote if that's where we end up. If you recall what we did at East Pike, the first, we just hired them to look at it, and then we came back and they, we decided to go forward with it, and then they went into, left scoping, preliminary design, then into final design. Does that help?
Yeah, so it sounds like we're asking the architects to, because like I said, this motion's on tonight's agenda, asking architects to design an office and leave, considering the modulars are at the end of their lifespan, and to leave options open to do we don't know what with the building. So just kind of throw it out there what they see.
That's why we're having the meeting now, and that's why we had it at the field to define what the scope is.
Well, and I agree that security is very important. I know when I was down there, the doors a long time ago when I first got on the board 3 years ago, the doors of all of the classrooms for security reason should be looked at being replaced. And there was when you go in, this is one of the concerns I had when you go into Eisenhower and you have that beautiful curved glass, it's all single pane. I was tapping on it to see what was double pane, what was single pane, what has coating on it to protect it from shattering. So that was kind of concerning, but not being an architect myself, I would defer to Tom being an architect or Elijah, what their opinions are on that type of glass. And I'm trying to think what else there was for safety. I do know those modulars, when we toured 3 years ago, they didn't have classes in them. But I did like how, even though they're not currently being used, how they did have all the computers set up in the modulars. Previously, they had that computer room in the modulars in a small room on the left-hand wing pre-COVID, and it was very cramped. So it was nice to see how that the kids could have a bigger room there. But those are things, though, with security-wise, removing modulars, looking at how the office is when people come into the building, and how we can work, kind of reiterating what Tom's saying, how we can rework what we have to make that building better.
Right. I think that's what we're doing. That's why I mentioned about, losing part of that curved glass wouldn't be to me, would be a benefit.
I agree with you. I mean, it's beautiful, but I'm worried about security, especially after seeing the pictures of the deer go through that glass last year. It wasn't the curb, but it was that window of just how much damage a deer could do, and very easily get into the building.
Right. Yeah, and I think what we've done with all the, not all, a lot of the buildings, you should always consider future expansion. I think at East Pike, when we did the office there, we considered that if that building grew, we wanted an office big enough that it would take care of some future expansion. I have a couple other people raise their hands. Barb, anything else?
No, I just you said about expansion. I'm worried that we're going to lose students left and right. Just with IEP and the trickle down effect that will have on the entire community. And one thing I did notice this year was the a lot of graduate students bring in kids, and that didn't happen this year. So I would hope that next year, hopefully COVID's underneath control, although I have a feeling that COVID will never go away. And there will just be the next COVID in the future, that those graduate students and those kids come back, because I really feel they bring value to our district.
Okay. And I'm going to stick with, thanks, Barb. I'm going to stick with the board at this point. So Tamara, you had raised a hand.
Yeah, so I think
Tamara,
that when we're looking at all of this, we do need to can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can. Yes.
It's a little
You were
spotty,
breaking
Tamara.
off from me, Tamara. I heard you a little bit.
She just left the meeting.
Is there another board member that has comments? We'll go next.
Mr. Kerr,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Mr. Kerr, go ahead.
Tammy?
so if we're narrowing down the scope, then why don't we just ask them to do priority one, and instead of doing, getting estimates for having them do everything?
Well, I think there's good reason to do all three things. Do the office, do the demolition of the modulars. I don't know if you've been in those modulars, Tammy. We toured them, a couple of years ago, and everybody in the administrative district, Greg Trout, they're way past. They're in bad shape, and if they're not being used, it'd be a good time to. The plan was always to get rid of them. They were only supposed to be there temporarily. And then again, there's been issues with the gym and cafeteria. There was even, and I can't recall, we were going to have to, I think, replace the cafeteria equipment there because it was either breaking or broke and was causing
I believe that's already been done, Harry. The tables were. Tamara's back.
Okay, Tamara, why don't you go ahead and then I'll ask another question.
Okay, so I'm sorry, my connection is bad. I missed what has been said, so this may have been said, but I just want to speak to Terry's comments on making sure that we have enough space in the future. Specifically, we know that our autistic support classroom at the Ben Franklin houses the younger children, so they're going to need a space when they get to the 4th and 5th grade. So we want to consider the space that they would need. And also, we're still sending students out for emotional support. We added an emotional support teacher. However, we still send students to other facilities for an emotional support classroom. With those additional needs, we may still have our 5 typical regular education classrooms per grade level, but we also may need to have some more specialized classrooms for the different populations that are growing. So I just want to say that I know this is a planning meeting, and I don't think we should limit our scope at this time because we don't know what's coming up, and we should at least plan to have some possibility to do an expansion if need be. Again, because we know that this is the accessible building. Horseman would not be the appropriate place. That's why we don't have life skills there in the 4th and 5th grade. So just, it would probably mean that all the special needs classrooms for those grade levels would need to be at Eisenhower. That's it.
Okay. Any other board members?
I do have one more continuing question. Okay, so I was looking at all of this, and no, I haven't been in the modulars because I can't get around very easily. But I was looking for the list of the facilities we have and what repairs and the priorities that we had assigned to them before, and I can't seem to find that spreadsheet anywhere. Can anybody forward it to me or make it available?
Yeah, after the meeting or tomorrow, I'll find it and send it to you. Is that all, Tamara?
Actually, what would be the difference in the cost of asking them to do a workup of all 3 priorities as opposed to just one?
Whenever you say just one, that's the entrance office and stuff, or?
Yeah, the entrance office. What would be the price difference between doing it from just the entrance office and the for just one, and then the difference between the removal of the modular rooms and the future planning capacity use?
The multi-purpose room?
Yeah.
So Tammy, if I can speak here, Terry.
Sure. Go ahead.
We are planning to include at least preliminary looks at what would be involved with expanding to a 500 student school in our planning. Now, if you want us to look at that more seriously than just a preliminary phase, we would be looking at revising our proposal and our costs. But right now, as it stands in our proposal and the fee that we've stipulated, we are already planning to look at least preliminarily what is involved in moving up to that phase 3 that you have in there. If that helps.
It does. Thank you. Right now, how many kids are at Eisenhower and how many are projected to go? How many are projected to go graduate 4th and 5th?
In 2009, Tammy, there were 228 kids at Eisenhower. For planning purposes, we should plan on a 20% growth, so that would take us to about 175 kids. And quite frankly, I think that's what we should focus on is that number of kids. that translates into needing 12 classrooms in the future. We can certainly leave the door open to adding additional classrooms, but that should not be a focus of this study. The focus of this study has to be on controlling the entrance, providing enough classroom space for the 275 projected kids, and move on that move down that lane. Doing it for anything else is wasting time. We're not going to approve anything else. It's good to have some flexibility on the future, but for goodness sakes, let's get 12 classrooms ready to go, and let's get that entranceway solidified. I'd like to make a push for the multi-purpose room, because right now we're losing periods in the middle of the day at both Horace Mann and Eisenhower that we can't teach physical education. It would be very useful to have that opportunity at this building where we could leave the dining tables out, not have to put them away, but also then be able to do physical education during those periods that we can't do now at either building. So that's why I'd be very interested in adding a multi-purpose room, but not go any farther than that. 275 kids is enough to get this door started. We got to get focused. I've said this a couple times now. It is very difficult to get this project done and study things that we're clearly not going to be doing.
I agree, Tom. Let's move forward. I got Uta raised your hand.
I did. I agree that, our initial look is definitely the entranceway, but I do think it's helpful to know what other things are things that we might want to consider, so you don't build that in such a way that you go, oh wow, had we known this 5 years ago when we did this, we would have done it differently to leave room for other needs that we may have for that building. But I also think it's important to remember that part of why we're doing this is so that we get a proposal that gives us what we want, but doesn't ask us to build the Taj Mahal, because we've been there. And that to me would be a complete waste of time and of resources. So, I really appreciate Eli being here and being part of this conversation in addition to other conversations that have been going on, so that you really get a feeling for what it is that we have an appetite for right now and what the priorities are, but also understanding what our needs may be in the future. Like Tamara mentioned, our needs for some of our students that we can't meet their needs in some of our other buildings. So I just want to thank everybody for, not only thinking about the immediate, but also trying to keep in mind what we might need to do or want to do in the future.
Thank you, Uta, and you said it better than I have said it, and thank you for clarifying those points. Cinda, I think you had raised your hand.
Yes, I did. I have several questions. First question is for Tom. When you're talking about the wing of the building that runs along School Street, you said it has 11 classrooms plus one other room. Does the 11 classrooms in your count include that first room right inside the door that we're talking about, that conference room?
Yes, it's 11
Okay.
rooms, including that one, and a life skills room, which I suspect was the original kindergarten room.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The next question is on Mike's presentation on the page that says priority 3, removal of modular classroom. I see the square that's the multi-purpose room that we're talking about the possibility of, but that whole group of classrooms along the hallway that has the nurse's office and the guidance and all of those things, that square, where does the library come into this? Is that library in that space that you're considering to be from the nurses and the guidance office and whatever else there was, special needs stuff.
Cassandra, the library is at the far end on the right-hand side of that hallway. It's probably a classroom and a half size room right now. That's where the current library is.
I know that, but it's not clear down at the end of the hall, correct? Is it at the very end? Okay.
It's at the very end.
Okay, so that's not even being considered to move. All right. My next question is, and I know I asked this of somebody before, I'm confused about the multi-purpose room. The typical, when you say multi-purpose room to me, I automatically think of a gym that can also be used as a cafeteria, or in some cases, like at East Pike, has a stage, can also be used as an auditorium type place, a gathering type place. Is that what the multi-purpose room that we're proposing or talking about, is that what that would be? Because I thought at one point I heard that, no, the multi-purpose room was considering maybe having the library in it and a STEM or STEAM classroom and possibly a computer lab, and making it a multi-purpose room that way. So can somebody define for me or explain to me which definition of multi-purpose room we're looking at?
Yes, Ms. Cinda, great questions. Allow me to try to hopefully clarify. And the answer is going to sound silly, but it could be both. I think that's the part of the work Elijah has to tell us what we want to do. And I don't know where we would put some of these classrooms. If we lose them, we need to find a new home for them. So part of that conversation would be, how do we best maximize that space in that room? Is it a combination of a gym / performance auditorium? Maybe, I don't know, but we'd have to walk through that. I did not take into consideration moving the library at this point, but that would be, I think, would be part of the work of Elijah, helping us walk through the programming side, how to best, I hate to say this, get our bang for our buck, meaning how is our money best spent and most wisely spent. And so it could be either or. Ms. Cinda, I know it sounds flippant, but I wouldn't know, but it could mean either or. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I thought that the idea of having a quote unquote multi-purpose room and have it be for multiple purposes other than cafeteria and gym, I thought that was a really good idea. And in that scenario that I understood, the library would have been included in that, which means we would have an empty room or classroom and a half where the library is now that we could use for future growth.
Yes, and Ms. Cinda, to your point, Elijah would have to fact check me, but you hypothetically, Ms. Cinda, could even take that library and make it 2 rooms. Now he would have to fact check it, and I don't know the space and size. I might be misspeaking, but that's a pretty big room to your point, Ms. Cinda.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anything else, Cinda? Thank you for your questions. Good questions. That's what we wanted tonight. Did anybody else raise their hand, board members?
Yeah, Terry, this is mine. I thought it was raised, but maybe it's not showing up that way.
I missed it.
I had a kind of a question for Mike. When we were looking at the yellow squares that he put in, which were great to illustrate kind of at least conceptually where some of this stuff was going, I don't recall seeing the old office space, the secretary's office and the principal's office and their little meeting room there, as part of that repurposed space into whatever, whether it's for the autism, as Tamara's pointing out, or classroom. And I just wanted to know what the administration's thoughts were on that particular space, because I think, there's, probably sufficient there for at least one small classroom, maybe a larger one.
Yes, Mr. President. What we thought about, sir, was in Ms. Eisman's current principal's office, there's a back door to a classroom. We thought that would be a good place for the autistic classroom. So if a kid needed a cool down room or need a separate room, that her current office is located right there. So we thought that was beneficial. So that was one idea, not saying we have to do it, but from a practical standpoint, it made sense to us. And then where the secretary is now located, we thought that office space could be something shared between the school psych and or the speech individual when they come in the room. Again, Elijah would have to fact check us and go through all that. Those are just our initial thoughts based on the needs of our kids and privacy and accessibility to that classroom. If we have, because we are expecting our artistic numbers to grow. If the cohort from Ben Franklin stay as intact, then we see that coming down to East Pike, sir.
Okay, that sounds good. At what point, and I guess this is a question for both Terry and for you, Mike, at what point, once we engage Elijah or his firm, does the administration have some of those, more detailed discussions with the architect? I mean, Tom laid out I thought, some pretty decent scenarios that maybe would need to be kind of integrated in that. But at what point do we need to start to take a look at that?
Yeah, no, in my opinion, I'll defer to Elijah, but my thought would be, I think the first step one is decide where we want to kind of put the classroom, or I'm sorry, the entryway at. Once we make that decision, right? Because we know that's, honestly, if we look at the classroom, taking the spare classroom, there's no secret. That'll probably be the cheapest of all options. If that's what the board's wanting to do or leaning towards, then I would probably say to Elijah, you know everything else that's remaining that we want and that we need. How do you make it work? And then we turn over to Elijah. Then Elijah works alongside with us, updating us. Elijah, would that be correct, or am I misspeaking on that, sir?
Yeah, absolutely correct, Mike. Yeah, we would right off the bat, we would have another meeting out on site, looking out at that office more closely, the office that's there and the classroom that's there. But we would then set up a couple of meetings with individuals, to Walter's point, not necessarily on site, they could be Zoom meetings, but to talk through some of the options as we develop them. I would expect, we had anticipated a month whenever we first proposed. We were thinking that the schedule was supposed to be moving pretty quickly, but it won't take too much longer than that, I think, to get some good options down on paper and to, based on meetings that we have with the board and with faculty.
Elijah, to that point, I think there is some concern that I'm pretty sure the board's 100% on board with the idea of trying to get something done with the office, and as we've experienced with the impact of COVID on our current construction project, they're still trying to wind that project up, and I think there was some concern on some of the board members to possibly, if possible, have this some of this work started in the summertime. If you're saying a month to kind of work through this, our next academic meeting, which really you're talking about academic programming at this point in time, with the administration, is that first Monday in January. You're saying that would be a reasonable time to come back to us with some of those preliminary ideas and some estimates on the costs?
Yeah, I think that's definitely reasonable. Certainly for getting all of these discussions going, getting some options and estimates down on paper, providing you with something more to look at and talk over. And then just want to make sure that we're going in the same direction that you want us to. And it sounds like we are at this point, that we're looking at the offices and security as a priority. The modular classrooms and their impact are a second priority, and then a very distant priority, only being thought about right now in terms of not hamstringing us for the future, but not necessarily planning out the phase 3, but potential for that to be included in the future.
And then Terry's got another committee meeting 2 weeks after that. that if, further review, especially as it would relate to the buildings and grounds, could be possibly taken another look at a couple weeks later.
Okay, thanks, Walter, for helping with the timeline. And Julia, I think you'd raised your hand next, and then Barb, you can go after Julia.
Thank you, Terry. I liked what Tamara had to say, and Uta. I really do believe that we will need more support room going forward. When I first went into Eisenhower years ago, before we even started talking about this, I just felt that the modulars are well past their lifetime. So I would support any proposal that would try to figure out the puzzle from that point of view. I think they're just really worn out, and other than to provide some temporary space, that's it. So I would support the survey to figure out where our property line is, to see if we took them out, if what that could be, that space could be used for again, and how far back the line goes. Obviously the office, but I think once we're doing it, it would be nice for future boards to know what the options might be in terms of a multi-purpose room. The last thing I wanted to say is that I love the glass arc, and I think it's an architectural gem in the whole county. So I'd hate to see us lose it. It's obvious it needs new windows, but I do sort of like that drawing that Mike, you provided, sort of showing a odd shaped addition right in that little courtyard that's in front of the glass windows. And there may be a way to sort of keep the windows, or at least the appearance of them, and also put something there in the little courtyard, because it does provide a nice little space, and it is kind of the center of everything. So I'm inclined to support a more broad approach to this in the planning stage than I am a more narrow focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Barb, you have something else?
I do. My comments kind of are towards Elijah. I don't know if I was specific enough to saying that I'm not in favor of expanding Eisenhower for multiple reasons. I think it would hurt academics, but we can further that discussion later. But I don't know if I was quite clear earlier, as other members of the board have chimed in. But I just want to remind the committee and board members on this conversation that AI came in a couple years ago and did big, huge drawings of our office and what that school could look like as a larger school. McKissick came in. They did drawings of making that a 500 student school with a gym. And I am sure in the office somewhere at East Pike and Admin, there is a bookshelf filled with binders from the last 30 years of how to make these schools bigger, to close other schools. So I really, Elijah, I don't want you to waste your time focusing on a 500 student school, but I am really curious, when you were asked by some board members and administration, which school did they want to close? Because you can't just build a 500 student school without closing one. So did they ask you to close to keep in mind closing Horse Man, or to close Ben Franklin?
They didn't mention, people who brought it up were just looking at, they didn't mention a school being closed. They just said there may be in the future an expansion. And we don't want to build anything right now that would keep us from the best option if there is a future expansion.
And Barb, I think the administration shared all those drawings with Eli. So, and if they haven't, they will. So Eli's shaking his head. So we're trying to save money and time there also. So.
Yeah, and I know he's asked. I just wanted to comment that there's probably 30 years of architects spending time redesigning our buildings, and nothing gets anywhere because the community doesn't want it. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members?
Mr. Kerr, if I could chime in real quick.
Yes, sir.
Elijah, can you give the board some clarity on what they're voting on tonight, what the actual motion does for you as far as the architect proposal discussion? What I told the board was tonight's purpose was just try to really discuss that scope of the work and what we want it to be and what it to look like. And I guess my question is, we give you a couple different options, ideas and whatnot. Does that amount of money you're charging us, the $15,000, does it encompass for like doing multiple different options for the board? I mean, you got the feedback, right? But if you want to vet other options out for the board, is that all inclusive? And I know I don't want to sound silly when I say that because I'm ignorant on the process, but I want to make sure the board, if they decide to vote on anything tonight, understands what exactly they're voting on. And that's just me seeking clarity. And I apologize if everyone else has it. That's not my intent to draw this out. I want to make sure the board's comfortable, sir.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And not a problem at all. We in every design process, we're going to look at many options. And from those options that we're throwing around, we're going to pick out a few that we think are the best options, but ones that might show a variety for the board to select from. You know, we try and narrow it down to 2 or 3 really good ones. And from that'll give the board enough to look at typically that that we can focus on aspects of one or the other that they like more. And sometimes you'll combine parts of each of these options, or you'll go full in on one of the options with maybe one tweak or 2.
So Elijah, do you say is it a fair statement to say that the board's not voting on where they're putting the entryway, closing any schools, putting a multi-purpose room? What they're doing is paying for you to go do some think work and bring that back to the committee and vet that through the committee. Would that be a fair statement, sir?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Terry, let me jump in a little bit. Elijah, he's not going to produce bid documents. These are going to be sketches, design schematics, maybe design development. There's going to be a variety of things. These are not for the money that we're paying him. He's not doing the final. He's not committing. We're not committing to final design work at this point. So don't get too alarmed here. He's going to come in with some tracing paper and some stick together things, but enough to show us his thought process. And these are not going to be bid documents. And I want to make that clear. We're going to have a chance to have a discussion further about the finer details of the projects and the options, the various options that are presented in more detail, but not 75 pages of bid documents.
Yeah, exactly. This is just the first step. And you know, once we have an option to move forward with, or even 2 options, we'll take those into another phase of design where we refine everything and get closer to those bid documents. But yeah, this is nowhere near that yet.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Mike.
If I can ask one more question, Elijah, is there anything you need from us as far as direction? I'm not telling you the board's voting on this tonight. I'm not saying they're authorizing anything. My point, though, is this is supposed to be informative and working together and trying to, you know, problem solve, attack what direction we want to go. Did you have, based on the conversation today, you have an idea that if this were to move forward, what the board is preliminarily thinking about as far as options and priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. From my standpoint, we need to decide on where the entrance is, as you said, get that right off the bat, and then we'll look at arranging the offices and the admin space at the front, and reducing the security concerns that are there as the main priority. And as we're doing that, we're going to be looking at additionally rearranging some of the space with the classrooms to potentially get rid of the modular units and see if we need to replace them with any units. But from even our preliminary looks, I don't believe that we'll need to do any additions at this time. But again, that's going to be part of the study to confirm that.
And Mr. Kerr, I'll defer to you, sir. I apologize. I just want to make sure we're on the same page, sir.
No, I'm glad. That was going to be my last question. to him was, did he get everything that he needs tonight? But Tammy Blank had raised your hand. You have another comment or question?
Yeah, I'd be all for Tom's proposal earlier about doing the offices and the security and for classroom space of 275 students. I'd be more than happy to support. But I think the more we add on to it, it's like going into Baskin Robbins and planning to get vanilla, and you walk out with bubble gum, mint chocolate chip, and double Dutch fudge. We will just wind up having discussions forever on what's going where and how it's going to go. And I think, yeah, I think Tom's suggestion earlier was the best.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on 1A and B? If not, that's on the agenda for tonight. I'll be making that motion and supporting that motion. We can move on to number 2.
Should we ask if there's anybody from the public that wants to speak, since this is a committee?
Sure, thank you. Anybody from the public want to comment? Raise your hand. Okay, moving on to number Eric Blank. Raise your hand. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I am a little concerned about the discussion that briefly grazed past the idea of closing another school. And I do want to say that if the discussion winds around toward closing Horace Mann again, that this is something that I strongly and directly oppose. I again stand behind the idea that we need to keep our residential schools. It is a huge feature for our town, and it helps to keep people coming to our town. So that is all I have to say for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Laura Thompson raised her hand. Go ahead, Laura.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would echo what Mr. Eric Blank just said in terms of the persistent attempts by various iterations of the ISD school board to essentially consolidate local elementary schools into one larger facility, often at the expense of Horace Mann. While I realize this is not currently in the scope of this work, I would like to commend the board for not working with Architectural Innovations, which saw a lot of our tax dollars disappear into a firm with really, a questionable track record of advising Western Pennsylvania schools. And Burkhardt Horn is certainly internationally and nationally reputable. But do we need to be putting out more funds at this specific moment, essentially headed towards some kind of, plan of reconfiguration? Now, Ms. Tremarky and others mentioned the modular units at Eisenhower, and certainly the condition of those is not optimal, and something really ought to be done about that. The other point I wanted to raise is that currently the age of Eisenhower and its unique design is actually a factor to consider. And I know the Burkhardt Horn does some historic preservation or has certain, credentials that way. And it's a really unique design, nice to preserve, very, highly idiomatic. And I think you ought to be considering that building is actually an architectural presence, both in Indiana and in Western Pennsylvania. And so that any designs that go to try to alleviate the situation of the modulars in the courtyard respects the historic fabric of that building. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Someone else had raised your hand, and I forget your name. It went away. It was Faye Broderick, I just remembered.
You want me to speak now?
Yes.
It's Faye Braddock. I just wanted to say that with everything that's happening at IUP, all the people losing their jobs, all the people who will be leaving the area because of losing those jobs, it makes me even more anxious and cautious about what kind of building changes might be going on in the Indiana school district. And I agree with what Laura Thomas had said and what Eric Blank said also. But I just wanted to tag on the piece about IUP. I think it's between IUP and COVID, I think it's going to be another year or two before we kind of know how things are going to shake out here longer term. So that said, I've been here 30 years. I don't know when the temporary trailers arrived at Eisenhower, but my definition of temporary and the sell-by date on those trailers, I'm guessing, was a long time ago. So one way or the other, that's probably something we need to attend to, but I don't see that necessarily means that we have to build a big school there and close down another one someplace else. Okay, thanks, folks.
Okay, thank you. Tom, you raised your hand again.
You're muted, Mr. Harley, sir.
I'm clicking buttons. What I'm interested in is securing the building, dealing with the modulars. I'm not interested in having a 6-year discussion about closing Horace Mann. That bus has left the station. I want to make it clear to the public, at least from my perspective, is that what we're talking about here is security on the entrance and optimizing Eisenhower in its current configuration. Thank you.
Harry. Harry. Yeah, I do have to comment on the condition of the modulars. When we did that walk around here a couple, 3 weeks ago, whatever that was, I noticed significant decay and rot basically around the window seals in that building. So I think it's kind of an unfair characterization to say that they are less than adequate. While I do know something about wood, my concern is that if I'm seeing that kind of deterioration on the outside without a real in-depth look and crawling underneath them and taking a look at some of the substructure, they could be in much worse shape than than we're currently aware of.
Okay, can we move on to number 2? All right, number 2 is the Eisenhower survey bid results, discussion on updated quotes. We had asked after the field meeting, it was discussed or suggested that while the surveyor is out there, at our last committee meeting, I guess we discussed this, I think it was Audit and Finance, that while the surveyors were out there, that it would be a good idea to pick up some more features. So Jared did reach out to Elijah and asked him, confirmed with him of what features we should pick up. So Jared went back to the 3 surveyors, got updated quotes, and those were sent out to all the board members. So that item is on the discussion for tonight, and it's related to number 1. We don't want Buckhart Horn to waste time and money to sketch something up, and it's not on our property, or the setbacks aren't met, or it's in the flood zone, or that paper street that's there is not usable. So there's a reason for number 2. Any discussion on that part, Tom?
It's always better to start a project knowing what the facts are. We need to know if we own that piece of property, and we need to know what impacts the design. There's some things that Elijah can't negotiate. He needs to know. He needs to know what those barriers might be on the project. So I'm in favor of moving this forward as quickly as possible.
Terry, can I just echo what Tom just said? From a legal perspective, you got to know the boundaries that your deed proposes. That's just basic to whether we weren't going to do anything. We should know where the boundaries of our own property are, and wasn't apparent from just looking, seeing pins and whatnot. So I think we're going to have to hire. I'm very much in favor of hiring somebody to figure this out for us, and then we know, make sure there's no discrepancies from the deeds.
Yep, good point. And they're going to pick up above ground, below ground utilities, stormwater, that sort of thing. And again, that impacts what their options that they, come up with. It could be a cost to move a 60-inch storm sewer line if you don't know it's there. So I think, Barb, you raised your hand.
Yeah. Has the property ever been surveyed? Is anywhere on those bookshelves over at the admin office, or is there?
It's on the deed, Barb. You just have to go to the recorder's office. It's on the deed, but that doesn't mean that there's not discrepancies with other landowners. That's what a surveyor is going to do. There's some question back there on that.
Barb, there's some historic surveys on site plans, and the question was whether they agree with what's actually reality or not. But the last time the property's been surveyed is at least 40 years ago.
Okay, so those documents exist. So then it's the discrepancy between specialty tires. So specialty tires have a problem with us using that space?
It's not whether they have a problem with us. Do we own the property or not? And the two streets are pretty clear. It's a triangle against the creek. That's the question. Where is our property? Also, getting the elevations, the floor elevations, those kind of things are not on those original surveys.
So you need the floor elevations in case you're building on, correct?
With the handicap codes, 3 inches is a real problem. So making sure that we're level and true, and there's no guarantee that one end of that building isn't level with the other end of that building. So
yeah, I was just gonna say I have a metal detector. If the pins are there and we know where they are, I can go free of charge and find them for the district.
You can do that.
They may not have been pinned.
Well, they may have been pinned, but they may have been pinned in the wrong place, and maybe Greg Trout drove a pipe in the ground. You don't know. You don't know. A surveyor is going to go out and do a survey, mark the corners, and with something that he, with his license, can defend in court. And then
I've had our property surveyed multiple times, and each one says something different. But anyways,
Barb,
I do like
we need to move on here.
Yeah, well, we're the three. Are we allowed to talk about the 3 proposals that came back?
Yeah, but one more point I'll make. The property corners are only a small part of this survey. It's also picking up all these features that you have to develop your sketches and options around.
Are we allowed to talk though? Which
Yes.
Which surveyor we like better over the other ones?
Yes.
I just like to put it out there that I think Botsford is am I pronouncing that right? Is the better one?
Yeah, Tim Botsford. Yep.
Does anyone agree, disagree from the committee?
Tim has an excellent reputation.
All 3 proposals are done by competent surveyors. And there's a price difference between the 3 of them. But all 3 of them have had a long history of being successful surveyors in the area.
And they're all licensed professional land surveyors. Any other comments from the board? So number 2 is on the agenda for tonight also. So we'll move on to number 3.
Mr. Kurt.
Yes.
There is not a name or anything on the agenda as of right now. Do you want to have that discussion during the meeting?
We can have it now.
I could enter it in before the meeting if you want to have it now, or whether you want to have it at the board meeting.
Tom, Barb. I think Barb, you spoke your choice.
I'm not sure why we're not picking the least expensive surveyor.
Well, I've been wondering that too myself, but I I've had experience with Botsford and I've had experience with Sheasley. I've not had experience with Bowman. So Tom, if you have, I was going to ask you, and I agree, if he's competent and does good work, why wouldn't we go the lowest route?
I've had experience with all three of them, and they're all, they're all competent, including Scott.
Barb?
In case this goes to court, I'm more comfortable with Botsford because just knowledge of how they handle court battles really well.
Do you have any experience with Bowman that would shy us away from them?
I'm sorry, say that again, Terry.
Is it Bowman?
Yes.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
asking Barb,
He's worked in various offices. I think he went on his own 3 years ago. He's probably done a half dozen surveys for me in that time frame.
Okay, any other board members have comments? Are we okay if we put Scott Bowman on the agenda?
That's who I would prefer, just because of the cost. And if they're all reputable, then I think we should look at the cost.
Anybody else? Tom, you good with Mr. Bowman?
Yes, as I said, they're all competent. Mr. Bowman is the least expensive, as Tamara pointed out.
Joey, your lips were moving, but you were on mute. No?
No, I've worked extensively with Mr. Botsford. I think it's a great firm, but I'm not. They're all good.
All right. So, go ahead, Walter.
I was just going to say, let's just go ahead. It seems like the consensus of the committee members is to recommend Bowman. If a board member wishes to choose that during the meeting, they certainly, have that ability. But if the majority of the committee is making that recommendation, let's just go with it.
Eli, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that that all of the work that they're proposing to perform is the same across all the surveys.
Jared, you can confirm that. I think you had discussions with all three and asked them to provide the same.
Yes, sir. After our last buildings and grounds, where we kind of expanded what we would like, I sent every single one of them the exact same email, just confirming again what the board or what the committee was looking for in the survey, so that they all had the exact same email and knew the exact same thing. So yes, everything that we are asking for should be reflected in their proposals.
And Jared, you're that they can't get that done, correct? I mean, they can get them because sometimes it's the pipeline. So somebody has time to come out and do the work, because I imagine it'll take a day or two.
Yeah, no, I mean, nobody indicated that they weren't ready to start the work, so.
Thank you.
Okay, can we move on to number 3? We'll put Bowman on the agenda with their price. Move on, number 3, the ESCO investment grade audit. Motion on the agenda to allow Constellation to perform a free, I'll say free, audit of district facilities and report back on possible ESCO projects. And this has been discussed at a previous meeting also. And Jared had reached out to Mr. Brown and confirmed that he would do this. So Jared, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, sir. This is really just authorizing, like it says, Constellation to perform what they call an investment grade audit of all of our buildings. And what that will do is allow them to come back to the committee and to the whole board with what they feel possible ESCO projects across the entire district. So they will be working probably closest with Mr. Trout over the next month or two to examine all the buildings, inside and out, and they will bring a full report then back to the board. And like I said, another month or two of possible escrow projects that could be done through Constellation as a continuance of our contract we had with them when we did the 2012, 2013 projects. Like you said early on there, it is a free audit. There is no cost to it, but the reason why we have the motion on here tonight is just authorizing them to work with Mr. Trout to actually do the work on behalf of the district.
I'll just emphasize too, we had asked that they make the East Pike roof a priority and Eisenhower too, since we are discussing work at both those locations. Anything?
Yeah, I'm sorry, sir.
Anything else?
No, once the audit and it comes back, and then it'll be up to the committee and the board to decide which projects, if any, you would like them to proceed with.
Okay, any questions from the board, or does Mr. Brown have a comment that he'd like to make? Nothing heard. Tom, you okay with this going on the, I think it's already on the agenda. So,
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
let's move this forward and see what they have to say. If we can put together another successful ESCO project, more power to us.
Yeah. Barb?
Starting ESCO project is grounds of a slippery slope of borrowing money. Something I am opposed to at this point in time. I look back when Walter looked at the ESCO and some of the projects they had there, and I just really feel it's kind of a waste of this guy's time. That I'm against borrowing money right now. I think it's a bad idea for our district.
We can actually use existing money, Barb.
This report, Barb, doesn't force us to borrow any money. I'd be surprised if there's significant savings over what we did, but I'm very interested in what these people have to say. If there's a few $100,000 to save additional on utilities, and we can knock off some physical projects that are sitting here for we need to at least look at it. This is a phenomenal opportunity to take a look down the line. It is not forcing us to borrow money.
And I understand that, but my concern is that you'll get a report that will say, oh, well, you need to do windows and you need to do XYZ, you need to do this at the high school and the junior high. And we continue to neglect 3 elementary school buildings. And we know that one needs a roof and it needs electrical done and dire needs, handicap accessibility at 2 of them. And tonight we were talking about Eisenhower. So I worry that it's a slippery slope to do other projects in the district when we really should focus on using the money that was borrowed, the $6 million that's left, the 1.7 that's in the capital reserve, to focus on fixing what dire needs our district needs right now that we already know. Like we keep asking the question again and again. Well, let's get this opinion. Let's get that opinion. Like I said, for 30 years, there's a shelf. I'm telling you, there's a shelf at East Pike with all of this information. And I feel that it's wasting someone's time that could be doing other things.
Ayuta, you raised your hand, I believe.
I did. Terry, do you want to just briefly talk about what ESCO is? We've got community members on the call, and while we know what it is, I think it's important that we make it somewhat understandable to people who are participating in the meeting.
Well, I'm going to ask Jared to do that since he's been
That's
having
fine.
discussions with Mr. Brown.
Absolutely.
And I agree with what Tom said, though, before Jared speaks, that, this isn't, we don't have to borrow any money, with making this motion and getting a free audit done. We may see some return on investments that are basically cash neutral. And then you can also use that existing $7.7 million, the $6 million that we borrowed, and the 1.7 in the general capital fund for ESCO projects. So you don't have to borrow any money, I want to reiterate. So Jared, briefly, I know we're behind. We have a board meeting that we were supposed to have an executive session before that starts in 1 minute, or actually starts now.
Yeah, yes, sir. An ESCO project really is just a project that somehow is tied to the district's energy usage, whether it's going to possibly increase the energy or more than likely decrease the energy that we use or conserve energy based on how we were to build, remodel some type of building within our district. So we did a big one back in 2012-13, which touched a lot of energy savings, and the savings pretty much paid for the project, which is a guarantee that we monitor every single year. And the company who did it, Constellation, is guaranteeing us that was part of the contract that we would save money that would help pay for the debt payment that we took out in 2012. Like we spoke about earlier, you do not have to borrow money to do an ESCO project, but there are companies out there who work on these ESCO projects because they understand and they work with the energy that is tied to however you are changing your building. And that is really kind of what the Commonwealth is focused on with ESCO projects, is how is your project going to affect your energy usage afterwards and after the project is complete. And that's what these companies focus on when they work on these projects. ESCO now is really just another way of procuring a project under the assumption that you will be in some way saving energy at the end of it.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Walter, you raised your hand.
Yeah, Terry, I did. I do want to add something to what Jared said. Typically, on this, the energy savings that you might realize from these ESCO projects will more than outlive the cost of the actual project. And I think that's important because not only are these ESCO projects potentially environmentally sound by reducing the carbon footprint or the energy consumption, but in the long run, they actually will save the district money, i.e. save the taxpayer money. And so while I understand the concern about borrowing additional money, if we can actually make money for the district by doing this and enhance our environmental footprint, I think we're obligated to at least take a look and see whether or not there's a project there.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on number 3? If not, I'm going to ask Mike and Walter, do we want to skip the non-agenda item? Because we're way behind.
If that's okay with you, Mr. Kerr, yes, sir. If not, we can go over it. I'll defer to you, but I'd like to, sir, just so we can get an executive session.
I think, Gary, we ought to at least have a brief explanation of this thing because I think it's important since we're battling this COVID increases. This may be one of the hard word items that we can use to help with that battle.
Okay. Jared, do you have a spreadsheet or anything that you're going to show us, or Greg?
I will defer to Mr. Trout on that. I know he has been working on it. I do not have a spreadsheet at this time.
I received a report today. Actually, I'm sorry, it was on Friday, and it was to do the senior high areas where the students are. You asked me to look for places where students wouldn't be without masks, and now we did look. I did look at the 6 cafeteria unit ventilators, thinking that instead of serving meals down in the new gym where we do now, that we'll probably go back to that area, and so it would still be an area of consideration. So I included those ones. But we have the nurse's office, the new gyms, the ERVs, and then we have the junior high. We also have the gym there. We'll have room 107, nurse's office, cafeteria, and then we have the elementary schools for the areas where the students eat. And with all those units, there were 28 proposed units. That would be 52,850. That's 52 850. The one unit that is not included was the one for the new addition at East Pike for the office, which will also include the nurse's space. We had so much snow and I could not get on a roof. And prior to that, I was actually quarantined. So I was not able to get that information to the company for an estimate on price.
Okay, thanks, Greg. And I'm going to ask that, you and Jared, if you could put together a matrix showing, school, building, what room, and then a cost associated with it for each of the buildings and all the rooms. And then I know when Mr. Brown spoke at one of our previous meetings, I'd asked him whether this bipolar would be related to ESCO, and he said it would. So maybe Jared, if you could have some discussion on that.
Yeah, I will ask the company that I got the price from if they would break it down per building and per room, so we would have a complete estimate on. Currently, what they did is they just gave me the total summary price for the 28 spaces.
Okay, and then Barb just mentioned in the chat room about the special education rooms, since there's a lot of close contact there between the students and the instructors.
Okay, I will add those spaces.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Walter, are we going to the board meeting or are we going to executive session?
Mike, your thoughts?
I think it'd be nice to check in, even if it's briefly in the exec session, make sure everyone's comfortable with the one item I have listed, and then we'll go to the regular board meeting, if that's okay with you, sir.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead to executive session, and then we'll go into the regular meeting.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mr. Brown. Thanks, Elijah.